This is Tech Gears. My name is Levi, and today we are taking a look at the kit lens that comes with the Sony a7C, and that's the 28-60 little compact zoom. If it's your first time joining this channel, thank you for watching it. Please give it a thumbs up if it helps you. But today we're going to look at if this is worth it here in 2024. This little compact zoom that is super cute. Honestly, it's about the same size as most of Sony's little compact primes. So you're getting a zoom in the space of bringing 2 or 3 primes. But is it any good? Well, first, let's talk about the focal range. It's 28-60 and it is an extending barrel design, so it's not always this compact and cute, right? So it does make its way out, making it a little bit longer, but while you're shooting, that's okay. I rather have that compact nature. This is something that's common with a few kit lenses, both Canon and Nikon, so this is not out of place. What is out of place, however, is the focal range. At 28-60, it is a little bit weird. I think a lot of folks would rather have 24 millimeters, myself included, but let's all blame Tamron for that. A few years ago, Tamron released their 28-75, and honestly, you voted with your money, or a lot of us did. It sold so well, that 28-75, that 28 millimeters became kind of a new standard for mid-range zooms. It was so successful, even Sigma came out with their compact mid-range zoom with a 28-70. So Sony looked at the market and said, hey, well, if 28's okay for Sigma and Tamron, 28 should be okay for us. Now, they compromised that by giving us 60 millimeters on the long end to help with a little bit of a compression. But again, if you're looking at a mid-range zoom, that typical 24-70, we're falling quite a bit short on the wide end, but at 60, even 70 millimeters is a bit shorter of your traditional portrait focal length of 85, but 70, 75 is still a decent way where you can get a nice portrait look. At 60, you're a bit short. But so as far as the focal range overall, it is a little bit disappointing. Honestly, you're really only covering 2 solid focal ranges, and that's your 35 and your 50. So the price on this guy is, and kind of talking about value here, is retailed at $500. If you get the kit, you're getting it for $300. Now, used, these are going for about $200. So for $200 to get the equivalent of potentially replacing a 35 and 50 millimeter prime, it's not that bad. Now, the biggest fault of this, and it's still, even we're looking at the speed of it, and that's talking about the aperture, it starts at f4, tops out at 5.6. Not terrible. I know the Canon one goes up to like 6.3, but starts maybe at 3.5. Nikon is similar. So this has a shorter aperture range as far as where it starts and ends, but this is definitely something you're not getting a ton of bokeh or background separation with. But what it does have as its saving grace, which is probably the most important aspect of it all, is really just being a sharp lens. So I actually compared it at both focal ranges, the 35 and the 50. Now, I tried to give it a leg up by going to 60 millimeters, so there's a little bit more compression there, but we're at 5.6. And I compared it to the 35 millimeter Zeiss, which this is a little 2.8, so quite a bit faster than the f4, and I believe this at 35 millimeters, I think I was already at f4.5 or f5. And then finally, the 50 millimeter 2.5, and this is that little awesome micro prime that Sony released shortly after the a7C. Now, both of those are available for, at least on the used market, closer to $500, maybe a little bit less. New, definitely more expensive. So they're close in price, but if you're looking at the used to use, you're definitely spending more on these primes. I think the beauty of a zoom, especially with a starting lens or something, if you're not sure if you should get it, is just learning what you enjoy. If you're constantly shooting only at 28 millimeters, and I put it out here, and you're feeling that, oh, you know, that's not too bad, there's a 28 millimeter f2 you can get rather cheap. If you're finding yourself shooting at 35-40, then you know you're going to be a 35mm shooter. And if you're constantly hitting that 60 or maybe just under, you know you can get a 50 or 85. But having a zoom range or a zoom lens to start off is going to allow you to find, hey, what do you like to shoot? If that 28mm is always not wide enough, at least you can know you can comfortably go get yourself a 24 or 20mm lens, and you know you're going to use it and enjoy it. So that's the beauty of the zoom range here. But we're comparing the 35 to the 35 as well as the 50 to the 60 here. So some comparisons. So first kind of comparison here, I want to look at how much wider a 28 is to 35. And it's not a huge range. 28mm is a very popular kind of street focal range. You'll find that that 27, 28mm lens comparability on like a Ricoh GR, where you have that kind of focal range, it allows you to have a little bit more of the environment than a 35 would, but it's a little bit tighter than a 24. It's literally right there in the middle. Now, it is one of those lenses, because I prefer 35, I always feel I have to zoom in or zoom out when I'm at 28, or with my feet, actually I have to kind of get a little bit tighter shot, or I'm pulling back. I'd rather have a 24 or a 35, and that's just my personal style. But you can tell here from the examples, 28 is a little bit wider. It's going to help you get a little bit more of that environment, but it's not a huge deal. So if we look at here, this 28 to the 35, I know we're at f4 versus 2.8. The only adjustment I made here was at the ISO to make sure they're exposed properly. You can notice they're both rather sharp. You're not losing a ton of detail. If anything, you are supposed to be getting those Zeiss colors. I actually like the color rendering I'm getting out of the kit lens. It's sharp, the colors look really nice, and it's surprisingly good. A lot of lenses you get, especially the older kit lenses, you always wonder if you're out of focus. They're not quite as sharp as you would want. The next one we're looking at here is the 50mm, and that's the 50 versus a 60. But again, I try to put it around the same composition here. You're going to notice, obviously, there's way more bokeh in the 50mm. I think the 50mm prime is a bit sharper, but it's still surprising how well the kit lens keeps up. It actually does very well for what you're asking it. And the final test, I actually wanted to compare the kit lens to what would be considered the, I guess, ultimate sharpness, and that's the 35mm GM lens. Now, I did shoot this at f1.4, so you can see that huge difference in bokeh, and at f4, so now we're more comparable, as well as f2.8. I don't know if I want to show that, but you're going to notice the sharpness on the GM lens is unquestionable. You can punch in 200, 300%, and depending what resolution you're shooting at, you're not losing any sharpness or image quality based on the lens. It's really going to be what your sensor can produce. But even compared to the kit lens, I think the kit lens holds its own. Now, what I will say, if you're using the kit lens for any kind of family portraits or get-together, especially if you're outside, if you're at a picnic, you're at a park, that's where it really excels at. It's just fast enough at f4, 5.6, right around there, where if you're taking a picture of 2 people, 3 people, they're all going to be in focus. It's sharp enough, they're all going to look good, the colors look fantastic. And again, when you're taking a picture of people, sometimes you don't want the absolute sharpest lens where you can see every, black head and nuance on their face. You want them to look pretty. So a lot of portrait photographers obviously step down, or they'll use diffusers, or they're working it in Photoshop just to help their clients or whoever their subjects are look a little bit better. So we're all not perfect, and if you're taking pictures of people, you want them to look and feel great. But I think it does a great job when you're comparing and looking at this, that you're still getting a quality lens. You're finding that you have that zoom range, that it works with you. But finally, just the size. I think that's the huge factor. The fact that I can bring a prime with me here, but then also have a zoom lens with me, and these are pretty much the same size. You're getting a really compact, fun lens you can just keep with you. Now, depending how you shoot or what you shoot, you may find that you just enjoy keeping the 35 on there. That's how I have. This is an A7C, and this little 35mm is almost glued to this camera. Now, I also do enjoy the 50 to some regard. This has been a really fun one, especially for the size. And I'll keep this with me if I have a f4 or a longer reach zoom. At f2.5, I'm still getting a really nice image out of this. But if you notice, these are literally the same size. It's just a nice compact lens. You can put all three of these lenses in literally the same spot you would put something like the new 20 to 70 from Sony, or even their 16 to 35, which are obviously both really small. You can still keep 2 or 3 of these lenses in that same area. So the size of this lens, the sharpness of this lens, and the value of it, if you're adding it for 300 bucks, I think it's one of those lenses that you might as well just add it to the kit, unless you already know exactly what you like. Hey, I know I like the 35mm, or I know I want a 50mm. If you're not sure what you want, I would say spring for the $300. If you really don't want to get it and you want to try just the body alone, depending on what camera you're getting with the A7C, the ZVE1, you don't want to get the kit lens. Again, on the used market, these are going for about 200 bucks. And for that value, it's one of those, yeah, it's hard to pass up. So if you were thinking about getting the Sony kit lens 28 to 60 in 2024 and hopefully even beyond, I would say give it a shot, and hopefully this video helped you out. This is Levi with Tech Ears. Really appreciate you guys, and I'll come at you later.